Former New York Met Nelson Figueroa joins the program today to give us his reaction to the Juan Soto signing, where he sees the Mets going with his pitching rotation, and how this lineup shapes out. Next on MetCast. Okay, Met fans, I'm joined by former New York Mets pitcher Nelson Figueroa. Nelson, welcome back to MetCast. Last time we had you was just prior to spring training. Boy, has there been some changes.
Oh, yeah. I think we've come a long way, baby. When you look at the team that had put in place, the level of expectations, the biggest pending thing that we had on the agenda was, would Pete Alonso make it to free agency? And, would the Mets find a way to not finish in last place? I think there was no expectations. And Francisco Lindor made that very, very clear in the first week of spring training. We kind of like it this way because last year there was so much expectations on their plate, so many things that they were supposed to do without playing a game, without being, even together in the same room. It was already destined that they were going to make the World Series, and all that pressure led to a huge disappointment of a season. And I think this year we saw a team, a manager, a front office, ownership group all kind of grow together. And no one could have seen this thing coming the way it came together. There's so many storylines, so many things that have never happened before. That was one of the things I kept going back to all the players that I talked with. And, never in history has there been a Latin pop star playing second base for you while also, trying to prove that he can belong in the big leagues. And he's having concerts after the game, and people are staying for that. Never in a million years would we ever. Jose Reyes had an album out already when he was playing with the Mets, and it wasn't happening. They weren't going to even put his songs on, and yet, Candelita and OMG was kind of the motto for the season. And man, what a motto it was, because they rode that wave all the way to being one of the four best teams in all of baseball when it was all said and done.
How do you feel last year played out for Francisco Lindor? In my personal opinion, it was like his ultimate breakout season. He was finally himself. Maybe it was the pressure saying, you know what? This community, this fan base is embracing me, because clearly he was pressing early on when he first got here. But last year we saw him blossom into this absolute superstar that we know he can be. And I hope that's what he is going forward. Do you think that played a role?
Of course, I think whenever you're the guy who signs the biggest contract at that position, and there's a lot of expectations that are being put on you, and going to a new team, and a new manager, new front office, new everything. The fan base as well. It's different than it is in Cleveland. All right, it's just different. I've played this game, and I've been in every major market. I've been in the smaller markets, and it's just different. In Cleveland, the expectation isn't nearly as dramatic as, oh man, they're paying you that kind of money, you better have a career year every year. And for Francisco Lindor, the type of player that he is, there's so many ways that he proves his value on a daily basis. It's with his glove, it's with his with his legs, with his bat, with his ability to lead, and be in the ear of others and tell them, hey, this guy likes to go to his slider with two strikes. You see it constantly, day in and day out. Where in the beginning we didn't know what to expect. We just thought this guy was just going to be a different kind of superstar that we have ever seen in a Met uniform, because he was getting paid that way, right? The game always, as we'll talk about, the market always continues to move up and up. But I think you didn't learn to appreciate him until you saw him playing 162 of 163 games and fighting to do that, even in this day and age where, they're trying to keep guys well rested and only about 130 games. He's out there every single game, whether he's sick, whether he's tired, whether his family and his daughters are sick at home, and he's driving 4 hours, back and forth in spring training to make sure that he's being a good dad and at the same time available for his team. He has proven his worth time and time again. And I think now that you go look back at that contract, now that you look at the outlier of that first year, and you realize who Francisco Lindor is as a player, you're talking about a guy who's a 30-30 threat every year, a guy who can hit 100 RBIs. The batting average is something that's a little worrisome, but it's productivity, right? It's all about the productivity, especially when you're getting more bang for your buck when he's hitting a
Mm-hmm.
double with two guys on rather than getting a little dribbler single. Maybe he used to bunt in the past a little bit more, use his legs a little bit more. Those infield hits count a little bit more, and he's not, one of those infield speedsters anymore as he's getting a little bit older. But I love the fact that he's available every single day. He's accountable, stands in front of the media, whether he's 0 for 5 or 5 for 5. You have the same Francisco Lindor telling you that the best part about being a Met is wearing that uniform and being able to go out there tomorrow in front of those fans, no matter whether they booed him or they cheered him. He's been able to keep the level of his game, continually rising right now, and I don't see it slowing down.
I totally agree with you. And now let's talk about big contracts as we're talking about. Last night, we're in a MetCast space on Twitter. Shout out to those guys, 3,000 Met fans strong in that space. We all rejoiced when we heard the news. What were your initial thoughts? Were you like, holy cow, look at this contract? Did you think he was going to be a Yankee? I mean, that's all we kept hearing. Yankees, Red Sox. We really didn't hear anything about the Mets throughout the process. So what was your initial reactions? And then please tell me what Juan Soto is going to bring to this organization.
Well, first and foremost, Scott Boris's handling of the negotiations was what I was well aware of. And Scott Boris knew that in his back pocket, he had Steve Cohen. At the last phone call was always going to be to Steve Cohen, and whether can you match or can you beat? What can you do differently that no one else is doing? And I think we saw what he was able to do and how they put that contract together. The signing bonus of $75 million right there up front. You have the contract. Without that signing bonus, just put it in perspective, right? If he only does the 5-year opt out and the Mets would have got him for 5 years, $250 million, you're thinking, hey, that's not a bad deal for 5 years of a guy's prime, a generational player like this, and you see what happens in those 5 years. And say he wants to move forward, it's only $4 million more per year going forward to keep him. If you wanted to back out, then you could back out. Then you still have abundance of resources to reload in that situation. But the $75 million kind of put it at a point where you're like, now it's over $300 million that he's getting for the 5 years. That makes it $60 million. Right there, you kind of say, you know what? They are in this for the long haul. And that was proof right there to Juan Soto and his camp that the Mets were going to put their money where their mouth was. Steve Cohen, again, this was the most coveted free agent that was on the board as soon as he signed Lindor. This was always the one that he wanted to get to. They didn't waste resources in trade to get him earlier than everybody else. He just waited patiently because he knew Boris, and Boris is constantly at Met games, and you've seen him at the stadium all the time.
Yep.
He's constantly there, so they've had talks along the way, and it's obvious that everyone knew that the richest owner in all of sports was going to say, "Hey, this is the guy I wanted." The more impactful thing I think is, for other teams, that would have been it. That would have been their crown jewel. That was, they gave it everything they had. They went all in and they got what they wanted. We know this is just the tip of the iceberg. That's the scary part, is that this was Steve making the move. This was not David Stearns making the move. Now, all of a sudden, he says, you know what, Mr. Stearns, here's the rest of the blank checkbook, and do what you need to do, because even if they don't do it right away, they can go out at the deadline, as we've seen teams do time and time again. The Dodgers did it, went out, got Flaherty, and it was a key for them winning the World Series. For people who are saying that, wow, this team needed Soto because this rotation is nothing, I ask you, please explain to me, the Yankees made it to the World Series with what kind of rotation? The Dodgers made it to the World Series with somebody else's rotation, since all their guys got hurt.
Literally.
They went through the playoffs and World Series with 2 starters and a bullpen game. That's unheard of. That is unheard of, that you are literally saying, we might take a loss in this game, but we might not. We're that good, we're that confident that we can get 3 innings out of an opener and then piece it together and still be good enough to beat you and win the World Series. So I look at baseball in a totally different light than before, where you're sitting there going, oh, you need 5 horses. You need 5 guys that are going to give you 200-plus innings, be able to get you 200 strikeouts. You don't need that anymore. What you do need is you need a depth of arms that can continue to provide you innings to get to that point, right? Once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. It doesn't matter how much money you spent on your roster. It doesn't matter how many wins you had in the regular season. We've seen this time and time again. Baseball is different once you get to the postseason, and none of that stuff matters. None of the records carry over, and we've seen it time and time again. So I think what you're looking for is building that culture from, whether I don't know if you can repeat the OMG culture that they had there. Everybody bought into that. Even Jeff McNeil was holding up the sign while he's losing playing time to a guy. So that was just a rare kind of thing that happened. Do I want to see Candelita back? Yes. I think he fits. I think he loves Carlos Mendoza, and Carlos Mendoza appreciates him as well. He knows that if somebody goes down, you don't bat an eyelash. Iglesias can play you 3 different positions and give you Gold Glove level defense. The hitting was an extra. We were very surprised by batting over 330. It's all of it. It's all of it. It's such a different feeling today in New York, where the Mets were able to say, "I'll take that from you, from the Yankees, and take their most valued prized possession and say this is ours now." And now all of a sudden, it's just not that. I was laughing with Moose today as we were doing our show on picks. I wanted to start out the show going, man, I can't believe they actually got him. They took him away from the Yankees. Clay Holmes is a Met. Wow, I cannot believe it. So they are able to go, right? You get a guy like Clay Holmes who, listen, at times had a 1.8 as a closer all the way through the first half. There are some things that, I feel that they can work with him. We saw Hafner do a tremendous job with Severino, with Minaya. The pitching lab really, really has worked. Even a guy like Peterson had came back stronger. Yes, it was a hip injury as well, but his arsenal has changed. The way he's throwing his pitches has changed. He looks like a different pitcher. Tyler McGill, his last 7 starts, he pitched barely a 3 ERA. These are all of the kinds of things that make you very, very excited about what he could do with a Frankie Montas, what he can do with all these guys that they're getting. And if you can take Clay Holmes and if he's able to put in the work and get his arm ready, because now starters are only going 2 times through the lineup. We're talking about, can he throw 75 pitches?
Right.
Well, he almost threw 75 pitches as a closer at times, not for good reasons, but that just tells you, like, I think he's big enough. I think he's strong enough. I think he's capable enough. I think his pitch mix is excellent. I think he has nasty stuff. And again, if this is an experiment that they're both sides are willing to try, you've got this guy for 2 years at least guaranteed. 3 years on an Oliver Perez deal, and they're talking about Oliver Perez deal from 2008. So there's no loss in this for me, because at the very worst, he still can be a back end guy in your bullpen. And remember, up until July or August of last year, this guy was an all-star closer. So it's kind of like Severino, where the stuff is still there. Maybe the change of scenery, maybe the change of personnel, maybe finally a different pitching coach saying the same thing, but in a different way. Yeah, I had it my whole career when I was coming up, trying to throw a slider, And I had one pitching coach with the Phillies who was like, hey, instead of turning your hand around the ball, he's like, turn your hand through the ball. And when I turned my hand through the ball, all of a sudden, instead of getting around the ball and making it loopy, I turned my hand through the ball, and I got really on top of my slider and made it actually move downward. It was just the way that I threw a baseball that was a little different than maybe some other coaches did. So for the other coaches, they were stronger about getting around the ball and throwing it this way, and I was stronger about holding my hand on top of it and pushing down through the ball, and that changed everything for me. So I could see that happening. It's different now because of the technology, because you can instantly get the feedback on the spin just in those bullpens.
Incredible. Now, I've been hearing rumors, and I'm pretty sure they're true, because we see how much involved she is as an owner. But rumor has it that Alex Cohen is way more involved than a lot of people give her credit to. She's completely changed the family atmosphere. She's prioritized Mets fans, families at the ballpark, the events around the ballpark, prior to the ballpark. And supposedly what I was hearing today on WFAN was Soto has a large family. He wanted the suite, which Cohen gave him. And that means an absolute ton to him, being able to have his family at the games, have their own private suite, their own entryway. And supposedly Alex Cohen facilitates a lot of that stuff. And she's kind of in the background, but coming to the forefront these last couple of years. Can you speak to that?
Oh, without a doubt. If you know Alex Cohen at all, you know that's really her motto is family first and putting that family atmosphere. The family room has been redone. The players are treated in a certain way. The wives are just the camaraderie for the wives is the same as it is for the players. They've got to find a way to get along. They are together the same way that we are. When you're with these teammates, you're with them longer than you are with your actual family. But those wives often get left behind. They don't leave them behind. They do things and events together so that they're constantly, having that support system. It's not easy when your husband leaves for 10 days and you're there with two
Right.
crying kids. Well, you know what? They put together groups and they get together and they do things together. So those are always very important. I think Alex Cohen, there is there's a wisdom behind her that comes from that nurturing side of being a mom to a lot of these Latino players that she wants to make sure that they're okay. They truly mean it. There's a lot of owners that are very hands off and just stay back. No, I mean down to Grandpa who sits right in front of the on deck circle. He wants to watch every single batter. He wants to wish them luck. He wants to let them know that he supports them in every single way. I mean, this is really a family oriented ownership group who they put a lot of priority in that. And even with Carlos Mendoza, the hiring of him, he was unbelievable in spring training when I got to speak with him. And the biggest thing that he kept going and talking about was building relationships. And I said to him, how do you even know everybody's name right now? It's week one. I'm there
Mhm.
literally week one of spring training. And I'm like, how do you know everyone's name already? Like, it's crazy. He's like, I've been here for 2 weeks. He's like, but I've had conversations over the phone. I've done Zoom calls with the players. He's like, I try to get to know them a little bit. And then when we get to see each other face to face, we already have a little bit of a background together. Then I tell them, hey, my office, I've heard it before. My office door is always open. But when
Mhm.
you're a first time manager, you really mean that because
Right.
although the front office and the analytics department is helping you put that baseball strategy together, it's understanding each of the puzzle pieces and how they're going to work together. It's understanding who's even like the locker room setup. Who needs somebody to watch over them? Who needs to be near? You can't have always rookies by the veterans. That's how it used to work when I was coming up. The veterans always had their side of the clubhouse, and the rookies were always in the corner by the bathroom. That's not how it is in Mets camp, right? It's Lindor. Lindor is surrounded by Acuna's right next to him. Jet Williams is right next to him in the other locker, and Lindor wants it that way. Lindor wants to be in the middle of those young guys to make them comfortable. When you're around superstars, sometimes when you're in your first time in the big leagues, you're in awe. You don't know how to act, and you're a little
Yeah.
bit like you want to stand back and not. Meanwhile, Lindor's going over and he's challenging these guys to just games of they have a hoop, a basketball hoop set up above Lindor's locker, and he challenges these guys to shoot around and have some fun in the locker room. And everybody takes part. And everybody's invited to take part, and it's very, very cool to see because this was set in motion well before they had any success on the field. So to see that all come together, and yeah, they took their lumps. Remember, after that,
Mhm.
up until May 30th, you're sitting there are 11 games under 500, and you're like,
Dark
man,
times.
this is a disaster. And it took one guy having an off day to make them all say, you know what, this isn't happening because of what things are around us. This is happening because of what's in here. We've got to figure this out. And some of the veterans, even JD Martinez, what did he say? We got to have fun. We might lose, but we're going to have fun doing this, right? We got to come out here and find a way to have fun and things will turn around. And it did slowly but surely. And everybody had their moment this year. That's the thing I love about baseball is whether you are getting paid $53 million a year or you're a first time rookie, everyone seemed to have their moment this year and contribute in a
Right.
way that will make the 2024 yearbook something that you'll want to watch over and over and over
Now, before we reach out to the other free agents, I got to talk about some of our own. What is going on with Pete Alonso? I seen the arguments made from. I hear John Heyman say it at least 2 or 3 times. Well, if the Mets land Soto, odds are they're going to let Pete Alonso go. But then there's the other side where you're like, well, how you're going to convince Juan Soto to come here? But by the
again.
way, the greatest power bat that we've had in the last 2 decades. We're going to let him walk out and he's 29 years old. Like, that should
Yeah.
be a part of this lineup. Where do you see it standing? Is he going to be a Met in your heart, or do you see the Mets moving on and, reconfiguring this infield?
Here's the thing. Christian Walker has kind of gone toe to toe, or if not a little bit better than Pete in the last 2 years. Christian Walker is going to not command the kind of contract that Pete is.
Mm-hmm.
Pete hired Scott Boras. Now, Scott Boras just handled this record-breaking deal. Is there a possibility that there's some leeway, because Boras has already had a client break the bank? Boras had 9 of the Nationals the year they won the World Series, and it was by design that Boras continued to tell everybody, if you're going to spend wisely, you're going to win. And look at all my players who won with the Nationals. I do think Pete Alonso has constantly said he doesn't want to leave New York, which is a bad negotiation ploy. He's constantly, whenever he's been out and around at Knicks games, Rangers games, he's wearing New York Forever T-shirts and things of that nature. The other side of it is this as well. What did he tell all the players in the players-only meeting? I want to be in the playoffs, because if this is my last time as a Met, I want to feel what it's like. He didn't know what that feeling was like, other than the quick 2-and-out, against San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to admit, he had one of the most memorable home runs in Mets history on the 2-strike pitch from Devin Williams right there, the changeup that, pushed them to the next level. So I can see Pete possibly taking, and it's not going to be a huge discount. I think he's somewhere in that 25 to 27 range. I don't see him pushing 30. The only 30 guy we've seen is why am I blanking on his name, from Detroit, that's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Cabrera?
Cabrera he got a
day.
legacy deal. He got a legacy deal because they didn't want him to leave Detroit, because they want him to go into the Hall of Fame as a Detroit Tiger. So he got a legacy deal, and that was like $32 million. Is Pete Alonso a Triple Crown type hitter? No. Is Pete Alonso, a Gold Glove defender? No. So you look at the guys that are ahead of him in those 2 categories. Again, Cabrera just retired, but then you also look somebody like Freddie Freeman. And you have to realize Matt Olson was younger than him and took way less of a deal. He's only
a couple
making 21
years
a year. Yeah, and he's making only 21 a year. But that's how Atlanta. I don't know how Atlanta does it. There's something in the water. They get all these guys for pennies on the dollar. But I do think Pete. I think Pete wants to stay. And why would you not want to stay right now? Why would you not want to hitch your trailer to that wagon as well and be a part of that? Can you go somewhere else? Sure. Are you going to go somewhere else for a lot more money? No. So if all things are equal, and this is where it's different, right? Because only $5 million more on paper between the Yankees and the Mets, but Soto chose to be a Met. Well, the structure of the contract was way different, and it also pushed.
There's also only 1 year he was there. Pete's homegrown.
Right.
We drafted him.
I think you have to. If you're Pete, you had the most fun, even though you didn't perform as well as you could. You had the most fun that you did in a Met uniform about what this team was able to accomplish, and just to think that what the ownership group is going to do. Would you throw that away for $2 more million a year? Say if somebody else gives you 28 instead of you getting 26, I think Pete in his heart of heart wants to stay a Met, wants to be a Met, and I think he's going to be a Met. I think it would make this lineup incredible if they had that big bopper in the 4-hole, and just you waited to be a part of something special in a Met uniform. It's about to get real good here in the next
100%. And that's what leads me to our next point, is the starting pitching. I mean, I'm looking at this staff, and for me, until I see it happen, I can't trust Senga's going to be healthy. How can you? I mean, he had 2 injuries.
But there were one. One was a freak injury.
Right. I'll give you that.
One was a freak injury. So, and the day he did that freak injury, I'm sorry, what was he punching out 10 Braves in 5 innings? So, and he could have came out. It was 9 punch outs through 5, and he went out for the 6th, and it was a freak accident. So that'll go with the injury thing. That he wasn't injured the year before. He pitched fantastic and pitched better in the second half than he did the first. So I think he came in. he came in the spring training and he shut himself down early, and the arm kind of took longer to bounce back than he would have liked. But you're talking about a guy that we know has frontline starter stuff.
What do you
They
think
pitched
about
to
this team adding another frontline starter on top of him? Because
the
outside
more
of him, maybe Mania, or do they pivot to a Garrett Crochet type of trade? I mean, it's going to cost a ton.
it would cost a ton to go get Crochet, and yes, it would. Do you have the assets in place to do that and pull that off? I think you do now because of all the things that you
Mm-hmm.
did when you got rid of Scherzer and Verlander. So I do think there's a plethora of prospects that they can go. They're in. I think one of the things that was so attractive for Soto and Boris was it's not just a win now mode; it's a win now and win for the future mode, because you can see this young crop that's coming up. I mean, we've read time and time again about these pitchers that are down there in the minor leagues that are tearing it up. Some of them that were highly scouted and drafted high, but there's some of them that have got an opportunity and continue to get better and better. So I'm excited to see what those guys are capable of doing as well. So do you need 5 aces? Do you need a perfect rotation and a perfect bullpen? No, it's never going to be that way. Injuries happen. The Mets had more injuries than I think anybody when you look at the bullpen last year. Every
Mm-hmm.
single one of the guys that they counted on went to the IL, if not out for the season. And you had Edwin Diaz having an up and down roller coaster year. But at the end of the day, you didn't want anybody on the mound other than him when the game was on the line. You know what he's capable of. So I think if I can get I would love another 2 bullpen arms. I like Stanek. Stanek I thought was fantastic for the
I
Mets down
agree.
the stretch. You're talking about a guy throwing 98, 99 with a dirty split. I would love to bring him back. I would love to you got to get a lefty in there that you can count on, because you didn't even use a lefty you had both of the Youngs on the roster and you didn't even use them. You went to Peterson. So I think during the season, you're going to need lefties. So I think they need to go out and find a couple of lefties that they can go to immediately. It's really David Stearns has done this for quite some time now. You see what the success of the Milwaukee Brewers over the last 6 years. They've outplayed the Cardinals and everybody else in that Central Division, but nobody seems to know that. Nobody seems to talk about that.
Right.
And they've done it. And they've done it with a lot of guys who are retreads. Willie Adames, when he came from Tampa Bay, he blossomed into a star who got paid handsomely by the Giants. There's so many names that you could throw out there that you were like, oh yeah, that guy was a Brewer as well, or that guy went to the Brewers and had success. You just look at the kind of the blueprint that he had put and laid down there, that foundation. That's why the Montes deal came about, and people were kind of like, whoa, this guy gets injured, this guy did this and that.
Right.
But his second half numbers as a Brewer, that Stearns knows the metrics that the Brewers are using and what they're getting out of him. He knows how to read that information and say, you know what, we could still get even more probably out of him, because he's past the injuries. He's stronger now. His pitch mix changed. I looked it up on brooksbaseball.net. I looked it up. His pitch mix changed after he became a Brewer, and you saw the strikeouts rise. His strikeout percentage rose incredibly.
Yep.
And when these guys are pitching, not like they have to pitch 7 innings, 8 innings, but they're understanding that, hey, give me the hardest 5 innings you can get through and go and attack hitters. They're doing a fantastic job. So I have the utmost confidence that, as we said, I see what we have on paper. I love it. There's a lot of good things I see already on paper, but I know there's still more. I know that, and it's no longer about maybe the sexy name that's out there. But you know what? They did well with some diamonds in the rough last year, where giving Severino the
Right.
1-year deal, giving Mania the 1-year deal, and I think I just read that who was it? Andy Martino said that there's some traction about
With
Mania
Bueller.
wanting to come back. Yeah, and
I also
Mania
saw
wanting to come
Bueller
back
as
as
well,
well.
maybe. Okay.
And now if you can get those two, and you now bump
Right.
McGill to the bullpen, you start bumping down some guys into the bullpen, and you're going to get people, because now when you go as a free agent, you're like, hey, they've got Soto, they've got Lindor. If Pete signs back, I want to be a part of this thing. This thing could be
Vientos.
really, really special. Vientos, he blossomed, but the thing is, he was just himself. If you look at his
Mm-hmm.
numbers in AAA over the last 3 seasons, he was just himself. And I constantly talk to him about that. I have an affinity for him because he's also number 27 in a Met jersey. So I told him, I said, I know what you've been through. I'm telling you, I go, you know nothing about me. I said, one day you want to sit down, I can show you on Google. Every year in the minor leagues, I led not just my team, but any league I was in every category. And I didn't get a chance, and I didn't get a chance. And I'm sitting there saying, why? For me, there's 13 spots on a pitching rotation that I should be able to fight for. For him, it's only one guy that he's going to be fighting with, you know? So I said, that's hard because it's just one guy that you have to beat. I had to beat out 13, and I couldn't get that break still, no matter what team I was with. So I had to go to the ballpark every day with the focus of, I'm not pitching to be in AAA. I'm pitching for that one scout that's here that says, you know what, this guy doesn't belong here. We could use a guy like this. And maybe they work out a trade for me, or maybe the next year I sign in the offseason with them. Anything could happen, but you can't ever take, not even, you want to kind of sulk when you get sent down and say, you know what, I'm going to take a week off and just get my mind right. That's the new player where I need to get my mind right. Where I was of the ilk, I don't have time to get my mind right because all I need is having a bad week. If I had a bad week, then I may never get a chance to go back up again. So I have to get down there and say, you know what, I'm ready to pitch tomorrow if you need me, so I can prove that I'm the best pitcher here that doesn't belong here.
Now, my last one for you, Nelson, I've been enamored with this guy for a while now. Is there a shot that Brandon Sproat makes the opening day roster? And let me get your opinions on this kid.
Well, listen, without a doubt, you're looking at plus stuff, and he does not lack confidence. And the one thing that I've told kids that I've trained, to professionals that I've trained, once you go on a 60-foot, 6-inch mound and you're running 90-foot bases, it never changes for you again. So what you have to do is get very, very, very good at your craft. And how do you do that? You don't make mistakes. You cannot live you cannot live in the professional game making mistakes and making them over and over again. Sproat learned very early about his pitch mix and about what worked, about moving the ball all around the strike zone, not becoming a one-trick pony, being able to elevate but also execute. And he's been a joy to watch. I mean, he just pounds the strike zone with that intensity and that fastball, the plus fastball. I remember just 2 years ago, we were sitting back and saying the Billy Epler built bullpen. I think the Mets had the fewest fastballs thrown over 98 miles an hour in all of baseball. And it was like, 40 thrown fastballs over 98 miles an hour compared to, some of the other bullpens where it was like, 400 balls thrown. Like, everybody's throwing harder nowadays. We get it. They're measuring from a different distance. They measure from 55 feet, not like they used to when I played. But the fact is that these guys now are throwing harder. They're spinning the ball faster. They're working harder to try to get swings and misses. Sproat is one of those guys. He has swing and miss stuff. And so that's going to play. Again, are they going to thrust him right there in the middle, or do they bring him along and they groom him and you move him up slowly because you're going to need him? And could he be? The Tampa Bay Rays are very famous for this, right? The Tampa Bay Rays, their opening day rotation and bullpen isn't the same guys that you'll see in the playoffs. And the closer is almost never a guy that you see during the season. Like, oh, who's this closer? He wasn't even on the team in the first half. Yeah, we know. They are one of the smartest teams in baseball because what they did to save money was the sixth inning guys were all very similar pitchers. They threw with 2,400 RPMs plus. Their sliders were 2,700 RPMs with a 1 to 7 o'clock movement on it. And so they had every pitcher in their system that were like that. They lined up and they pitched the sixth inning all the same way. And what would they do? A month of that kid pitching, and then they send them down. Then they bring up the other guy for a month of that kid pitching, and then they send them down. So for that slot, they're paying the minimum all year long. And then they go for the seventh inning. They didn't sign anybody to long-term deals. They never signed a closer to a multi-year deal for tens of millions of dollars. But they had guys that you're like, oh my God, every single one of these guys throws 100 with nasty movement and a nasty freaking slider or changeup, right? And you blew your mind. But that's how they were built. They were built the way where they could plug and play. Didn't matter what the names were because nobody could tell you the names of their roster or their lineup every year. But they always had success because they were able to do that. But baseball changed the rule. Now, if you send the guy down more than twice in the same season, you have to put him on waivers and somebody else can grab him. So that changes it for the Tampa Bay Rays. And did you notice they didn't have their first playoff season in quite some time because of it all of a sudden? So that's really one of the ways to Yeah, so I noticed that early on, and I used to laugh because I'm like, I don't care what the name is on the jersey. These guys all throw the same. Then you would see these crazy gifs of these pitchers with these changeups that went across the whole plate, and you're like, another Tampa Bay guy. I don't even know this guy's name. And then lo and behold, they make the playoffs, and oh yeah, this kid didn't even make the team out of camp, but he's the closer now, throwing 104. I don't get it, but it worked for them.
Yeah, well, Nelson, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome back to MetCast. You're always a pleasure to have on. Anything
Appreciate
you
you.
want to put out there as we head out?
Well, of course, I've been very, very blessed over the past year and a half. Been working at Channel 11 on Pix 11, 7 o'clock. Have a Sports Nation nightly show with Mark Malusis. Everybody knows him from WFAN in the New York area. He's just a fantastic sports guru, and we go back and forth. He's a Yankee fan. I'm a Met fan. So today was a day where he kind of had to let it all out. I had to pat him on the back and let him know it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But he even admitted it's a changing of the guard. This isn't normal for a guy to go from the Yankees to the Mets and to do so because of more money. That's never happened. So I think that's one of the things I'm very blessed to be able to talk about sports and have a platform. And congrats to you guys. I mean, we were talking about it before we came on here.
Yeah.
You started out small, and now look at you guys have a huge following, and it's great to see. I think you guys keep things in perspective. You do a fantastic job, and it's my pleasure to come on here. But you guys can also tune in weeknights on 7 o'clock on WPIX Channel 11 in New York, and check out me and Mark Malusis arguing about how wonderful the Jets Giants are and the rest of the world of New York sports. But thanks again for this time, and I'm sure we're going to do it again and again.
Mark's actually a friend of our program too. He was on our space last night. We were trying to console him, but let's just say it was a little bit of a rowdy crowd.
Oh man, you had the seat today. It was so funny because we had Nick Turturro on as well, and I thought he was going to lose his mind. He goes, "You know what it's like? It's like you've been dating this girl for a year, and then she turns around and she's with your little brother. Now she's with your little brother. Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Oh my God." He goes, and I said, "What if it was the Red Sox or the Toronto Blue Jays, American League East, right in your face for 19 games? He goes, "No, that's like with my cousin. I can get over that." He goes, "I don't have to see him, but on special occasions." He goes, "But you're going to go and date my little brother?" I was dying laughing. It was really, really fun.
That is great. Nelson, thanks so much again. Met fans, as always, we'll have new content for you throughout the week. We'll see who else we get, and we'll be sure to break it down for you. But until next time, take care.